A pregnant bobcat had chosen to make her den in Margaret's backyard. Instead of being afraid, she welcomed the wild visitor, believing it was a blessing. She knew it was best to simply observe from a distance, letting the animal hunt and roam freely while she watched from her kitchen window, camera in hand, as part of her daily morning routine. The quiet companionship brought her comfort after losing her husband. Weeks later, on a sunny afternoon, Margaret discovered the bobcat had given birth to kittens in the nest beneath her deck. But the joy didn't last long. A sudden noise at the front door signaled a far more dangerous intruder. A masked man who believed he'd found the perfect helpless target. He stepped inside thinking she was alone. But what happened next would leave police stunned. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Just west of Colorado Springs off Highway 24, Margaret Thompson sat in her kitchen, steam rising from her morning coffee as she gazed out the window at the empty bird feeder. 6 months had passed since Harold's funeral, and the house still felt too quiet, too still. At 72, she found herself rattling around in the ranch-style home they'd shared for 43 years, each room echoing with memories. Her daughter Sarah lived in Seattle now, her son Michael in Boston. They called weekly, visited when they could, but the long stretches between felt endless. That Tuesday morning in early March changed everything. Movement in the backyard caught her eye. Not the usual squirrels or cardinals, but something larger, more deliberate. Margaret set down her mug and leaned closer to the window. There, near the old garden shed Harold had built there first summer here, a bobcat moved with fluid grace through the dormant flower beds. The wild cat was magnificent, easily 30 pounds, with distinctive black-tipped ears and that characteristic stubby tail that gave the species its name. Her tawny coat was marked with dark spots and bars perfectly designed for blending into the dappled shadows of the Colorado foothills. But what struck Margaret most was the cat's behavior. Instead of passing through like the occasional wildlife visitors she'd seen before, this bobcat seemed to be settling in. Margaret watched transfixed, as the female bobcat she could tell by the smaller, more refined features compared to the bulkier males she'd seen in nature documentaries, began gathering dried grasses and small branches. The cat was making a den beneath the raised deck Harold had built for their 35th anniversary, the one where they'd spent countless summer evenings watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "Well, I'll be," Margaret whispered, her breath fogging the glass. Her first instinct might have been fear, but Margaret had spent enough years in Colorado to understand wildlife. This wasn't aggression or invasion. This was a mother to be seeking shelter. The bobcat's sides showed the telltale roundness of pregnancy, and late winter was indeed birthing season for these remarkable creatures. As a longtime volunteer at the local nature center before Harold got sick, Margaret knew that female bobcats sought out protected, quiet spaces for their dens. Apparently, her backyard qualified. She reached for Harold's old Nikon camera on the shelf, the one he'd used to photograph birds and landscapes during their hiking days. The weight of it in her hands brought a bittersweet pang, but also comfort. Harold would have been thrilled by this visitor. Over the following days, Margaret established a routine. Each morning, she'd position herself at the kitchen window with her coffee and Harold's camera, maintaining a respectful distance while documenting her unusual tenant, the bobcat, which Margaret had begun thinking of as Lady in her mind, seemed to accept this arrangement. Wild animals Margaret knew from her nature center days could sense intent. Lady appeared to understand that the elderly woman watching from behind glass posed no threat. The photographs became Margaret's new purpose. She learned Lady's patterns, early morning stretches, in the weak spring sun, late afternoon, grooming sessions, the careful way she'd slip away at dusk to hunt. Margaret never saw the kills, but sometimes Lady would return with evidence of success, a satisfied air about her as she settled into her den. "You'd love this, Harold," Margaret would murmur, reviewing the day's photos on the camera's small screen. It became a way of including him, of feeling less alone. The presence of wildlife, life creating more life in her backyard felt like a blessing, reminder that the world continued its ancient rhythms despite personal loss. Margaret was careful to maintain boundaries. She knew from her wildlife education that habituation to humans could be dangerous for wild animals. She never attempted to feed Lady, never tried to approach. This was observation, not interaction. A privilege to witness, not possess. She'd seen too many well-meaning people create problems by trying to help wildlife that didn't need helping. She kept the trash latched, the hedge trimmed, and never left pet food outside. Spring arrived gradually, coaxing buds from the apple trees and painting the grass green. Lady's pregnancy progressed visibly. Margaret found herself worrying like an expectant grandmother. Was Lady getting enough to eat? Was the den warm enough during the cold snaps? That still occurred in March. Then came that terrible night in early April. Margaret woke at 2 a.m. to sounds of combat, snarling, hissing, the crash of something wooden breaking. Her heart pounded as she peered out the bedroom window, but darkness obscured the backyard. The fight, whatever it was, lasted perhaps 3 minutes that felt like 30. Then silence. At first light, Margaret anxiously checked the backyard. Lady was there, but something was wrong. The bobcat lay awkwardly in her den entrance, her usual alertness replaced by stillness. Even from the window, Margaret could see dark staining on the deckboards. Blood. Margaret's hands shook as she reached for her phone. She dialed 911 and the dispatcher patched her through to Animal Control and a Colorado Parks and Wildlife Ranger. The officer who answered, a young man named Brett, listened carefully as Margaret explained the situation. "Ma'am, can you see the extent of the injuries from where you are?" Brett asked. Margaret grabbed Harold's old birding binoculars. There's a gash on her right shoulder, maybe 4 in long. She's breathing, but she hasn't moved in 20 minutes. "Okay, Mrs. Thompson, this is important. Is the animal responsive? If you tap on the window, does she react?" Margaret tapped gently. Lady's ear twitched and her head lifted slightly before dropping again. She responded, but barely. Margaret reported, "That's actually good. She's conscious. Now, I need to be honest with you. We're dealing with a multi-vehicle accident on Highway 36, and our teams are tied up. It could be several hours before someone can get there. The Bobcat needs immediate first aid to prevent blood loss. Are you willing to help?" Margaret's mouth went dry. Approaching a wounded wild predator went against every safety rule she knew. But watching ladies suffer, possibly die when she could help. "Tell me what to do," she said firmly. Brett's instructions were precise. "First, your safety is paramount. Injured wildlife can be unpredictable. You'll need thick gloves, welding gloves or Heavy leatherwork gloves if you have them. Long sleeves. Pants, closed shoes. Move slowly and speak in low, calm tones. If at any point the animal shows aggression, hissing, striking out, you back away immediately. Understood. Understood. For the wound, you need clean cloth or sterile gauze if you have it. Apply moderate pressure for up to 10 minutes. Don't keep checking. That disrupts clotting. The goal is to stop active bleeding until we can get there. Use tongs or a long wooden spoon to place the gauze. Do not put your hands near the animal's mouth. Margaret gathered supplies. Harold's thick leatherwork gloves from the garage, clean dish towels, the first aid kit from the bathroom. Her heart hammered as she slowly opened the back door. Easy, lady, she said softly, inching forward. I'm here to help. The bobcat's golden eyes tracked her approach, pupils dilated with pain and stress. Margaret could see the magnificent animal's ribcage rising and falling rapidly. Shock probably. The wound was worse up close, a ragged tear that had bled significantly. Moving with deliberate slowness, Margaret knelt 3 feet away and extended the folded towel toward the wound. Lady growled low. A warning. Margaret froze. I know, sweetheart. I know it hurts, but you need help. And you've got babies to think about. Maybe it was the tone. Maybe exhaustion. But Lady's growl faded. Margaret pressed the towel gently against the wound. Lady flinched, but didn't strike. For 10 long minutes, Margaret maintained pressure, murmuring nonsense comfort. Words like she used to when her children were hurt. The bleeding slowed, then stopped. But Lady looked worse. Panting now, tongue slightly out. Brett, Margaret said into her phone, which she'd kept on speaker. She looks dehydrated. Common with blood loss. Can you safely offer water? Small amounts only. Use a shallow dish or drops from your finger. Don't force it. Margaret fetched a saucer of water. Lady lapped weakly at it, managing perhaps a tablespoon before losing interest. That's good, Brett assured her. Now need you to back away and let her rest. Check every hour from a distance. We're working on getting someone there, but this accident, there are fatalities. I'm sorry. The day crawled by. Margaret checked hourly, offering water when Lady would accept it. The bobcat remained still, breathing, but unresponsive to Margaret's soft calls. As afternoon wore on, Brett called with worse news. Highway 24 was completely blocked by a rock slide. No one could get through. Until at least tomorrow. She needs nutrients if she's going to make it through the night. Brett said. Can you manage feeding? Under Brett's guidance, Margaret prepared small pieces of raw chicken breast from her freezer. No seasoning. No bones, just plain meat cut into swallowable pieces. Lady managed to eat 3 small pieces before turning away. That night, Margaret barely slept, checking on Lady every 2 hours with a flashlight. The bobcat remained in the same position, sides rising and falling steadily. Still alive, still fighting. Morning brought a small miracle. Lady had shifted position and was grooming her good shoulder. A positive sign. Brett said when Margaret called. The wildlife officer instructed her to offer more chicken and water, which Lady accepted more readily. Healing behavior, Brett explained. Wild animals are incredibly resilient. Keep monitoring, but I think she's turning the corner. By the time the wildlife rescue team finally arrived that afternoon, Lady had vanished. The den was empty though. Bloodstains and scattered gauze proved Margaret hadn't imagined it all. She felt strong enough to leave the rescue Officer Diana said after examining the scene. That's actually the best outcome. If she's mobile and hunting, she'll recover better in the wild than in captivity. You did everything right, Mrs. Thompson. Margaret felt a mix of relief and disappointment. She'd grown attached to Lady, worried about her like family. But Diana was right. Wild animals belonged in the wild. For a week, Margaret saw no sign of Lady. She maintained her morning vigil at the window, camera ready, but the backyard remained empty except for the usual birds and squirrels. She worried constantly. Had Lady survived? Had the pregnancy survived the trauma? Then, on a brilliant Sunday morning in late April, movement under the deck caught her eye. Lady emerged, thinner, but moving normally. The wound now a healing scar. And behind her, stumbling on oversized paws, came two tiny forms. Bobcat kittens, perhaps 3 weeks old. Their eyes newly opened to the world. Margaret's hands shook as she raised Harold's camera. The kittens were perfect miniatures of their mother, spotted and stubby-tailed, tumbling over each other as they explored the few feet around the den. Lady watched them with the universal patience of mothers everywhere, occasionally nudging one back when it wandered too far. "Oh, Harold," Margaret whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Look at them. Just look at them." For the next month, Margaret documented the little family's progress. The kittens grew rapidly, their play becoming more sophisticated, stalking and pouncing on everything from grass blades to their mother's twitching tail. Lady was an attentive mother, nursing them, grooming them, and as they grew, bringing them prey to practice their hunting skills. Margaret found herself planning her days around their active periods, usually early morning and dusk. She started a journal documenting behaviors and milestones. The larger kitten, which she privately called Brave, was always first to explore new territory. The smaller one, careful, hung back, observing before following. She knew she shouldn't name them, shouldn't anthropomorphize, but she couldn't help herself. They'd become her purpose, her joy, her connection to life, continuing despite loss.